All right, just finishing things up here. Thanks everybody for coming. All righty, we are live. Cool. So we will get started here. Share my screen. All righty, cool. Well, welcome everybody to the Student Chapter of the Wildlife Society's General Member Meeting. We have a great one here for you today, so thank you all for coming. So we are doing dues this year, so if you guys want to go out on projects, you will need to pay dues, and those are $5 a semester or $8 a year. We have a couple options to be able to pay those. You can either do PayPal with my email there. Otherwise, there's a cash drop-off option at my office hour on Monday from 10 to 2. And if I'm not in there, I might be somewhere else in the building. Just shoot me an email, and I'll be right up there as fast as I can. But one note about using PayPal, make sure you use the friends and family section, so then you don't get charged an extra fee. If you have any questions, Brylan, I, or Melinda, all can answer those for you.
All right, so along with dues, we have just a general membership form for you guys to fill out, along with hold harmless forms if you would like to go out on projects. I sent out some emails yesterday if I have either dues or hold harmless from you, because you need both of those things to go on projects. So if you got an email from me, please either turn in your dues or hold harmless. So the hold harmless form is just a PDF. You can fill it out with Adobe Reader, or you can print it out and take a picture and send that back to me. When you do send it back, please make sure your subject line is TWS hold harmless, and you put your full name in the document title, just to make things a little easier for me to manage. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Lizzie.
All right, our conservation topic this week is about how birds deal with drought. So there's 2 studies done in Venezuela and Borneo, and they found that, bird populations were like stable, and then all of a sudden one year, birds just stopped reproducing. In one instance, one species went from 65 nests down to 7, which is an insane drop in reproduction. So they did a little bit more digging and found that the longer-lived species of birds, they decreased their reproduction during drought years to conserve energy, which this actually led to an increase in their survival rate, which is super fascinating, because since they're not spending the energy on raising young, and they're only spending it on trying to survive, that they could actually survive better in drought years. Short-lived species told a different story. Their reproduction rates remain the same, and so their survival, of course, decreased since they were trying to survive the drought and raise young. But the reason that short-lived species couldn't reduce their reproduction was because for them, it's a big deal to just skip a year of breeding. That like when you already only live a couple years, that's like almost half your life. So yeah, species that tend to live greater than 9 or 10 years, they decrease their reproduction, and species that lived shorter than that, their reproduction stayed the same. So this just kind of shows like the importance of conserving as much habitat as possible for species, because then if one area is in drought, the species could still remain stable if another area of their habitat is, perfectly fine, and they can keep reproducing without any negative effects. So with that, we have our quiz bowl question. Now, I know this study was done in the tropics, but we're gonna try and apply it to Wisconsin. So which of these bird species would you expect to have a decreased reproduction during drought, but an increased survival? So you're gonna wanna think about how long these birds live.
Answers are rolling in. Ooh, pretty mixed bag here. Answers all over the place. One's starting to pull ahead. Couple seconds. 3, 2, 1. Ending it. Sharing the results.
All right, you guys got it correct. It is the gray jay. They tend to live longer than these other songbirds because they don't migrate far, and yeah, they just have longer lifespans too. So their reproduction would decrease during drought, but their survival would increase.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie.
Mhm.
Super cool stuff.
And then just as a little bonus, we have a current event, the Eastern Black Rail, and there's a distinct population segment of the Pacific martin. They were both listed as threatened on the ESA recently. So they were listed due to habitat loss and fragmentation, and their populations just haven't been able to incline in many years. So, I mean, sad that they need to be on the ESA, but also good news that they're going to be protected now.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Hey everyone, so yesterday I sent out an email to you all about the Midwest Fish and Wildlife Conference and how applications are now open to be sponsored by our student chapter. I sent out and I said that this is due Thursday, November 5th at 11:59 p.m. All members are welcome to apply, and if you sent in an abstract, make sure you apply. Again, the days for these conferences are February 1st through February 3rd. And then if you have any questions, you can email me and send your applications to me as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. These are great opportunities, guys. These online conferences, you can kind of get a little taste of what conferences would be like in person for a much cheaper cost. So no better way and no better time to start to go to these.
Hey guys, fire effect small mammal trapping project. We ended trapping due to the weather, but we're gonna do visual observations. Still debating on when they'll be yet, so email me if you're interested. I also have 2 cameras I'm gonna be setting up. One that's gonna be put in Burrard Oaks, another at our other spot, and we're gonna do some other surveys with cameras as well. So if anyone's interested, you can email me right there.
One more, Jacob.
Yeah, also, I work for grounds crew for the facility services. My supervisor wanted me to email this out to you guys. Basically, we need people for snow crew this year. If you want to volunteer, you can volunteer for TWS, and per hour it'd be $13, and that will go back to the TWS. Basically, it'll fund them, and maybe you guys could do like projects. Maybe whoever for certain projects, it'll go to their project. Or if you just need a winter job, you can work permanently, and that's $10 an hour. I'm actually one of the crew leads, and I know another Wildlife Society member is also another crew lead. So there's a couple of us out there if you have any questions as well. Down below is our supervisor's emails if you're interested in either of these working hours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. Amanda.
Hello, everyone. So I don't know if you remember the series that we're doing. It's called Project Wildlife. It's an educational video series that has some extra aspects to it, but it's geared towards elementary students and letting them see what kind of projects we're doing and like helping them learn about wildlife research. So our first project is out, the Flying Squirrel Project. Very exciting. There's a video on YouTube, and I will send the link out later tonight to all of the TWS members. And there's also a nice PDF that you can see here of info sheet for the kids to learn a little bit more about the species. And then there's a separate document for like teachers, some lesson plan ideas. So I emailed out like 10 different schools today, all elementary schools in Point. I've already gotten a lot of responses and some teachers that say, yeah, this is great. So we're doing good. And if you want to help with this, we could definitely use your help, use more people. to help film or edit or work on the info sheets, definitely send me an email.
Sweet. Thank you, Amanda. This is super cool stuff. Go check it out, guys.
Hi everyone. So seeing our Bible study, it's a Bible study geared towards natural resource majors. It's tomorrow. It'll be every Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. and it's on Zoom. So the Zoom link is right there on the slide. And it's a really great way if like you want to learn more about the Bible, and also like meet more natural resource majors. And so if you have any questions, my email's there. And then also the other leader, Megan, her email is right there.
Awesome. Thank you, Melina. Muscle Project.
All right. Again, while the weather is nice, the Freshwater Muscle Project will be going out this week and next week. We have the DNR reached out and asked for our help again. But this week we plan on going out Thursday. It's supposed to be relatively warmer-ish. So we will be going out to Jordan Park and finishing up that survey for the year. We ask if you could please email us to confirm your spot, and then we can take out as many people as really want to go. We do have a limit of 10. We just ask that you do email us to make sure that we get everybody the proper equipment and everybody has their waivers filled out. Any questions about this week? If not, I also have the next slide. Oh, never mind.
Waterfowl Project. Sorry, Luke, did you have something else?
I did. I have one more slide that was in there, but I can finish it up. The DNR asked us for next week. I'll just send that other slide to you, Nate, and you can send off the information.
Sure.
But next week, Tuesday, we're going to meet at 3 West TNR. Again, send me an email if you can make it or have any interest. But I forget where the park is. It's about an hour away. We'll be driving down there, meeting with the DNR. But they're actually draining a dam, and that makes really good survey protocol for us to look at all the mussels that could be underneath the dam and in that flowage. So we'll be moving those mussels to higher water and sampling and measuring them. So please reach out to either of the emails down below if you're interested, and we hope to see a lot of people. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Luke. Waterfowl Project.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Aiden, and I'm one of the co-leaders for the Waterfowl Project. As you can see on your screen, the Waterfowl Project is looking for co-leaders. So generally, this takes place in the spring semester. You go out, you help check wood duck boxes at the Mead Wildlife Area. No experience needed for this position at all. We encourage anyone who's interested to apply, especially freshmen and sophomore. We'll be sending out the application shortly, probably within the next day or two. If you have any questions or if you want to submit a completed application, you can just send that to either me or Victoria down at those two emails below there. And the last day to apply would be November 27th at midnight.
Awesome. Thank you, Aiden and the Waterfowl Project. Deer Project.
What's up, guys? So we are still looking for 1 to 2 co-leaders to join our crew. And again, freshmen and sophomores are highly encouraged to apply, just like Aiden mentioned. You don't need experience to join these. That's where you get the experience. So what we do, we trap deer during winter months below like 32 degrees, because anything above that, the deer get too stressed out and heat up. And we collar and ear tag adult does, and also ear tag fawns and bucks. And then, yeah, we bait traps usually Thursday nights, and then check the traps pretty early Friday morning, like right at first light. So definitely working in cool environments and fairly late Thursday night and then definitely getting up early Friday. So we definitely want morning people. And the application was already sent out. Nate could send that out again if anybody needs it. But other than that, any questions or concerns or complete applications can be sent to my email at the bottom.
You got a question in the chat there, Jeffrey.
All right, what we got?
When are applications due?
Okay, applications will be due the 25th, so this upcoming Sunday. We can just call it at midnight. And so when will you get notice? Probably a week or two after that, we'll probably start doing interviews, and then we'll make our decision probably shortly thereafter that. Are you required to be present for setting and checking? Ideally, yes. That way you're getting the experience rather than just hearing about it. Anything else?
All righty, cool. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Gray Squirrel.
Hey guys, so the Great Squirrel Project is also looking for about 3 to 4 new co-leaders. Like they also said, it's not really any experience needed. We'll train you on anything you really need to know. But it's a really great opportunity to get animal handling and like data analysis experience. So if you're interested, especially freshmen and sophomores are encouraged to apply. We can send out that application again, but if you want to send those to me, my email's on the screen. You can also answer any questions you guys have as well.
Sweet. Thank you, Maddie and Gray Squirrel Project. Tons of opportunities to get involved, guys. Definitely apply for these co-leader positions. This is a perfect way to get really involved with TWS. Sawwet.
Hi guys. We're looking for new co-leaders, preferably freshmen. We are out in Schmeekly again, this year, and we're trapping quite a few owls. So there's plenty of volunteer spots open, and I can send it in the chat.
Sweet. Thank you, Carter. Shelby.
Hey everyone. So every Friday, we feature a wildlife photo taken by one of our members on our Instagram and Facebook page for what we call Fauna Friday. So if you have any cool wildlife photos that you've taken in the past or recently, you can send them in by DMing me on Instagram or emailing me. And then you can follow our student chapter on multiple platforms. You can like us on Facebook, you can add us on Snapchat with that code up there. You can follow us on Instagram. And if you didn't know already, we record our meetings. So if you miss this meeting or you know someone else that missed this meeting, you can watch our recorded meetings on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelby.
All right, folks. The day has arrived when you guys can order your apparel. Super exciting. We have clothing featuring both the design that Sophia made for us and also stuff with our logo on it. So pretty cool. I sent out an email earlier today with more details and also the link to our store. This year we are offering only shipping directly to you, which obviously like you'll have to pay for shipping then, but it's also less, we have to worry less about like spreading and contact tracing and all that kind of stuff. So just is safer this way. But feel free to browse and pick up some apparel for yourself and for your family.
Thank you, Lizzie. Go get that merch, guys. Go get the merch. Alrighty, so that's it for announcements this week. Next week, we have Michael Joyce coming in from the Natural Resources Research Institute as part of the University of Minnesota Duluth. And he's going to be talking to us about some really awesome fisher, marten, and bobcat research. So can't miss it, can't miss it. Going to be an amazing talk. I've got to work with Michael a little bit. Super awesome guy. Has won some presentation awards as well. So should be a super, super cool talk. But without further ado, we have Janelle Sharhag today from Hawaii, and she's an airport biologist, and she's going to be talking a little bit about her journey and how she got to where she is today. So Janelle, I will stop my share, and then the rest of the time is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna try to share right now. All right. Okay, can everyone see that and hear me well?
We can.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Janelle Sharhag, and it was actually not too long ago that I was there as a grad student. So I still may know some of you that are there. I graduated with my master's in 2019, and I was a TA. So I might have gotten to TA some of you, which is great. And today I'm going to share kind of my story of navigating the wildlife profession. And I want to tell you about my story with the goal of giving you tips, because I know one of the things that most people wanted to know in these meetings from professionals is, how do I get a job? I know that's kind of on everyone's mind. And especially the way things are going, we want to have the best chance we can. But I'm calling this the winding path, because even though I can give you all kinds of tips, and so can many other people, everyone's path in this field is very unique. I don't think I've met anyone that has the same story, and they're all even wildly different, which is great. You know, it adds a lot of diversity and a lot of depth to what we're doing. So with that, I will get started. I'm just going to go through my education, my research, my career path, and my current position. And then I'm going to spend some time on hopefully helping you with any tips I have on experience, resumes, interviews, and take some questions. And again, we all have a different path. This is mine, and I hope it is helpful. So I was a late bloomer. I actually went to college when I was 16 and studied philosophy for 2 years. But then I had some health issues. And so it was almost another 8 years before I returned to college and decided to study wildlife. Because I was older, I thought, oh, well, maybe I should do as least amount of school as possible. So I started actually at Fox Valley Technical College. They have a 2-year natural resources program, which I loved. And so you have to take classes in forestry, fish, wildlife, water, soil, education, and surveying for that degree. And they are very heavy on getting their students field experience, which also Point is as well. So when I came out of my associate's degree, I had 180 hours of volunteer work with the DNR under my belt. And most of that time was with a buck mortality and fawn recruitment study. And I would go out every weekend and I would help set the drop nets, clover traps, and box traps. And then we would check those traps, and we would sit on the drop nets at night and waiting for deer to go under them before we drop them. Our goal was to put collars and take some biological information on them to study buck mortality and fawn recruitment. This is probably one of the most fun things I've ever done. And then I did a lot of miscellaneous stuff. I called the DNR, I called several people in the DNR, and just whatever they had going on, I was out there doing. Eagle nest monitoring, prairie seed collection, surveying, even did some well monitoring. I always went to the registration stations when they were required. And it was actually nice because hunters had to take their deer to a station at that time. And so we would get to age over like 200 deer a day on the busy days. And then I also made sure to get as many certifications as I could. So I got chainsaw environmental education, wilderness first aid. I started my wildland firefighter certification and also took chemical immobilization of wildlife. And because I came out of that associate's degree with all that experience, I was actually able to get a job right out of it. I got some pictures of the deer project here before I get into the job. So this is a clover trap. And so, like I said, I was able to actually start working after my associate's degree. So I was a wildlife technician with the U.S. Forest Service in the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, which is about a 3-hour drive northwest of Stevens Point. Absolutely beautiful area and so much going on there. On this position gave me so much different kinds of experience. The main goal of my position was to maintain elk habitat in the forest, but we also helped on radio collaring, telemetry, elk calf searching for those elk. So one of the things we would do is elk really need open areas to thrive, especially in an area where there's so many wolves. So they need those open areas to also help them with protection from predators. So we would go into an area like this in the middle of the forest, which for one reason or another is open, and we would make sure to keep it open. So all those little trees growing in on the back there, we would remove those. And we had a rotation. So we had about 500 acres we managed, and we did about 100 acres a year of keeping those areas open for elk, which was quite a job. And it was fun, but it was also challenging because of so many things, the mosquitoes, the remote nature of the locations, and several other things. So here's some more of me in the field. And here's a great one. So not only did we do a lot of the elk work, but I got to be in the water a lot. And one of the first things that got me into wildlife damage management was beaver dams. So the beaver dams the beavers would make a dam in this, what's called an impoundment, which is to control the water level. And even if we could trap them out, we still have to remove a dam. And we can't use explosives because we don't want to damage the pipe. So we would have to go in and remove these dams by hand, which was a pretty messy job. As you can see, I don't look very happy here, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun. We also got to do a lot of nest box checking, maintenance, cleaning, things like that. And then we would get to work with the DNR occasionally. So we got to do some sturgeon pit tagging. So we surgically implanted the pit tags in the sturgeon, which was a very unique experience that I loved. So it wasn't just the elk work, got to do a lot of things. And we also had a lot of bat work. So we would do acoustic surveys every month at night. And then once a month, we would also do mist netting, where we would trap the bats. And as a perk, I got to play Smokey the Bear several times. This is at the Lumberjack World Championship up in Hayward, Wisconsin. And so I got to do that every year. And I think a lot of people don't, I'm not sure what the perception of the Forest Service is in terms of wildlife, but I loved my job at the Forest Service. So I'd really encourage you guys to take a look at the kind of opportunities that the Forest Service has to offer, because as you can see, you can get a lot of different wildlife experience with a seasonal job there. And finally, I was able to help out on a bear trap line while working there. And this kind of was the start of where my career eventually went. I've always been interested in bears, and I made it known to everyone I kind of came into contact with. And so my supervisor one day said, you know, someone called and wants to know if you can help on run a trap line. And so each season I got to run the trap line for 2 weeks to hopefully collar female bears, which turned out to be a study that was from UWSP, and that was ongoing for decades now. And because of that, and because of my interest, I knew I would have to go on in school. So in spring 2014 to spring 2016, I got my bachelor's degree from UWSP. So I also got to continue to work for the Forest Service during my time there, which was absolutely special. And because of the experience I came with, I did not have to go to Tree Haven. And I know that can be a challenge to find a summer job while you're also fitting in Tree Haven. So that definitely helped me. And I think unlike a lot of other people at point where they're pushing, you need experience, I came in with a lot of experience, but I lacked those harder sciences, the research knowledge, the statistical knowledge to be a biologist. And so that's where I really thrived, learning all those things. I also made sure to stay really involved. So I joined TWS. I became a co-leader for the Fisher Project. I did undergraduate research with Dr. Jeanette when he was still here. And I got to use that data that I helped the trapline with and do a study on black bear home ranges, which was really great. And I made sure to get certifications, go to any conferences I could, and also volunteer. So anytime TWS had volunteer work going on, I went. I also sought out my own volunteer work, just trying to stay active. I also joined the Conservation Leadership Corps. It's a great organization, and your president actually, I believe, was a member last year. So I encourage you, when applications come up, I believe in May, to apply for this. It gives you a great insight into Wisconsin conservation issues and also policy, which is really important. And while I was at Point, here are some of the normal things I did. I did the bird mist netting with ornithology. I went on the Saw-Whet Owl project. I did my 350 project. All that experiences that I cherish. And when I graduated, I got to use that black bear experience that I spent the time cultivating. And I started a seasonal job with the National Park Service in Shenandoah National Park. And I was a wildlife technician, but specifically a black bear technician, which I'll kind of explain what that means. That's a picture of a campground patrol when we had a nuisance bear. So I'm in the back there. And one of the things I forgot to mention with the Forest Service job was that initially I applied to that Forest Service job and I followed up with a phone call. I highly recommend always following up an application with a phone call if you can. And I talked to the biologist for about an hour, but he unfortunately already had 2 people in mind for the position. And so he couldn't offer it to me. But I said, well, thank you so much for talking to me. If something happens, please keep me in mind. And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, one of the people dropped out and I got that position. Here again, for the National Park Service job, I originally got a rejection letter and someone backed out, and I was able to get that position. So making the contact with people, even if you think you're not going to get the job or think you might already be out of the loop, is really important, because so many times people back out of seasonal positions. And if they remember you from a phone call or a conversation you had, that's a great way for them to go, oh, hey, I know who can fill this. Okay, so the black bear technician position. So bears do all kinds of things when they get used to human food. So, and that's the main challenge in a national park. You have a ton of people, a ton of garbage, people picnicking, people grilling food. And so bears start to get used to that food. And so they break into buildings, they break into cars, they break into campsites. And the photo on the bottom right is them trying to break into a bear canister. However, they were unable to. So tip for you guys, if you're in bear country, use canisters. They work well. Whereas hanging most often times does not work. And because of this, we would have to use different techniques to get bears that were food conditioned out of areas where there was a lot of visitors. So campgrounds, picnic areas. We would set culvert traps. That's a culvert trap on the left in a campground where we had a bear get several people's food. And then we used hazing techniques if a bear was actively in a campground or picnic area. So we used 12 gauge shotguns with non-lethal rounds, bean bags, rubber bullets, sometimes some noisemakers. And then in my left hand is a banger round, which is a small pyrotechnic that makes a big noise, works great on bears. And the top picture is a small bear. So if we were trying to catch a bear maybe under 2 years old, we might use a coyote trap like that. This bear was actually only about 25 pounds, to give you some perspective on that. And he was injured. And unfortunately, the most challenging part of the position is just managing the people. So to keep bears from getting human food is the best way to prevent bears problems. So people would leave their campsite, like the bottom right, and this is how they would leave it. They have their bag of dog food out, their coolers out, their trash out, a million other scented items on the table there. And bears move through this campground regularly every day. So what we would do then is patrol the campgrounds. And if we see a site like this, we would steal their food, bring it into the office, as you'll see in the top left. And when they come to collect it, they get a ticket, which is very just because there are signs all over the place and information when you check into the campground that teaches you how not to leave your stuff out. That's all you have to do. Just don't leave your stuff out. And besides that, all the trash cans across the park, as you can see on the top right, people can use those. Those are bear proof. But if they're not closed all the way, or if trash is spilling out of them, you'll get what is happening on the bottom left, and that's a bear tearing up the food. A bear can absolutely access a bear-proof trash can if it's not closed properly. And then we got to just see some really cool wildlife things while I worked here. So this is a small bear's lucky day up here. A buck just got hit by a car on the road, and the buck at this point is still alive. And this, I think, he might have been a little older than a 2-year-old, but it was a small bear, probably not over 100 pounds, that stumbled across this freshly hit deer and was able to have himself probably the feast of a lifetime. Well, probably 60 visitors watched from the other side of the road. And we had to deal with other nuisance species, other species that could come in contact with people, such as bobcats, raccoons, also coyotes, vultures, rattlesnakes, copperheads, anything that really came into conflict with humans. And we also had a peregrine falcon hacking program. So we got to raise baby peregrine falcons to be released in the park, which was an unexpected bonus of the job. And then another unexpected thing was the search and rescue. So almost all NPS employees are trained on search and rescues when you become any kind of seasonal or permanent, so that you can help out, because these rescue operations take a lot of manpower. So I think there's probably about a dozen search and rescues that I was on a year. Most of them are people just being unprepared in the backcountry and twisting their ankle or falling. But the first year I was there, 6 people died in the park. So this is Shenandoah National Park, right? I mean, if you've been there, you wouldn't think of it as a dangerous park, but 6 people died in 1 year there when I was there. So, all right, moving on. Because of this position, I became really interested in bear attacks. After all, that's what I was doing there, truly, was to prevent anyone from getting injured by a bear. And I did lots of research and realized that there had never been a published study on non-fatal attacks by black bears, and which kind of blew my mind. And so I was like, wow, an actual, question I want to know. And I knew Dr. Katie Sartini was looking for a grad student the next year. And so I came to her with the idea for this project. And so I went back to UWSP in the fall of 2017 to the spring of 2019 to get my master's degree. During that time, I created and analyzed a database of 210 non-fatal black bear attacks with the help of state and federal agencies and the cooperation of over 50 black bear biologists from across the country, which was just a great way of making connections all over the country. I had a great committee, Dr. Sartini, Dr. Hinkstrom, Dr. Crimmins, and Dr. Stetz. I would love to go into all of the results of my studies, but I don't really have time. So I'll give you kind of a highlight. One of the main things I was able to find out is that of these non-fatal attacks by black bears, most of them were defensive reactions. And those defensive reactions were a large majority, 85%, by female bears, and a large majority involved a dog. There were some predatory attacks, but those were much less, and almost all of those were by male bears and did not involve a dog. Then there was these other attacks that we could not classify as predatory or defensive, but most often involved a bear trying to get human food. And those were, again, overwhelmingly male bears without dogs. We also looked at what contributed to the severity of attack. So we ran a CART model, which is it's a neat statistical method. And we found that for the most severe attacks occurred when there was a dog, when the victim was female, and when that female responded to the attack by fighting back. So 75% of those cases involved ended up in a severe attack. So that actually has really big implications on how we tell people to respond to an attacking bear, also for people with dogs. So the takeaways are non-fatal attacks are not the same, occurring for the same reasons as fatal attacks. Most fatal attacks are predatory by male bears. Anthropogenic attractants were still a huge problem. Attacks weren't increasing or decreasing over time. Most of the attacks occurred on a male victim, who was either alone or in a group of two. Half of all the cases occurred in Colorado and California. And again, that's severity factor. So we're actually still working on publishing these chapters right now, but hopefully they will be out soon. Okay, so yay, now I have a master's degree. Now what? So right after I graduated, actually right even before the graduation ceremony, I went back to Shenandoah National Park as the lead black bear technician. So this gave me a higher pay grade. It also gave me more responsibility, but it was still a seasonal position. So my goal was permanent position. At this point, I had spent 8 seasons as a temporary employee, and I really wanted that permanent position, ideally with bears. However, anything in wildlife damage management, really, I was interested in. And I would work for state or federal governments is really what I was targeting. So I'll kind of give you an idea of the path I took. I started applying for permanent jobs, only permanent jobs, in the October before I graduated. I had a list of 22 state websites in states that I wanted to work in. And I would check these state websites 2 to 3 times a week. and apply to many positions. I would also check USA Jobs. And if you don't know what that is, that's where pretty much all the federal job announcements get posted, and you apply to those positions at that website. So I have checked every day because those positions go really fast. Sometimes they're only listed for one day. Originally, I focused only on federal jobs in those 22 kind of target states that I had. But after a year, I realized I should broaden my search. So I actually started applying to every single wildlife biologist position in the country on USA Jobs. And this is where it gets maybe a little depressing, but it does have a happy ending. I also check Texas A&M 2 and 3 times a week. But between October 2018 and February 2020, I put in 334 applications for permanent jobs in the state and federal government. And I got 12 interviews. And finally, one job. But I would have to say, this was a pretty stressful time in my life, which is why I'm being honest with you about it now. Because I think you should not be afraid or be disheartened, but if you go in with open eyes and know what to expect, it can be a little easier. But the happy ending is in February 2020 of this year, I was offered a position as a wildlife biologist for USDA Wildlife Services in Hawaii, which is where I am calling from now, where it is about 12:30, so around lunchtime, and it is 90 degrees. So it is at an appropriate grade for my education, which is nice. So to meet the GS-9 level, you need a master's degree. And then within 1 year, I get the upgrade to GS-11, which is, I feel very lucky for, because I know a lot of people have to start with that lower grade to get the permanent status. So I'll kind of explain my duties. I never thought I would become an airport wildlife biologist, but it's actually pretty cool. So right now I coordinate the state's airport wildlife hazard management program, which consists of 15 airports and 4 military bases. So I'm not working at any one airport. I'm actually coordinating the whole state's program with the Hawaii Department of Transportation. And I wasn't really aware of what airport wildlife hazard management was. So I'm assuming there are many of you here that are also not sure what an airport wildlife biologist does. So I'm gonna kind of give you a background. So the goal of airport wildlife biologist is to protect human safety and property while minimizing impacts on our natural resources. So our first objective is really to keep the people on the plane safe. But we also want to do it in a way that's not putting threatened and endangered species at risk or the environment at risk. So the primary hazards is bird strikes. And these happen, it's a rare event that happens every day. Because there are so many aircraft operations in our country, bird strikes happen every day, but most of them are not damaging. So we also have mammal strikes, and these are usually when a deer or a coyote is hit on the runway by an aircraft. In the past 30 years, almost 300 people have died and almost 300 planes have been destroyed from bird strikes. And it's estimated that $500 million in damage and associated costs are done every year. So then what? What do we do? How do we begin to prevent birds and planes from crashing into each other? It's a combination of research, habitat management, and direct control. So every airport, your wildlife hazards begins with a research project called a wildlife hazard assessment. And this is a 12-month long research project that goes in depth into all the hazards that are on and around the airport. And after a wildlife hazard management plan is created, and this kind of outlines how you're going to deal with those hazards that you found during your research. And then to reduce the actual attraction of the airport to wildlife is where habitat management comes in. And this is really counterintuitive to most of the habitat management wildlife biologists do. We normally want to bring species in. We want to make habitat more attractive so that, you know, this endangered species can thrive. Where on an airport, you want to do the opposite. You want to make that environment as unattractive to wildlife as possible, which is really interesting. And then we also do that direct control, which is a combination of lethal and non-lethal methods, trapping, hazing, shooting, and we use all kinds of different tools to do that. Pyrotechnics, shotguns, net guns, bang-arounds, a variety of traps and other fun stuff. But when you think of all the regulation and all the federal and state issues around an airport, there are a ton of federal and state permits that we have to get just to be able to do what I described. So the biggest laws we have to contend with are MBTA and ESA, so Migratory Bird Treaty Act and Endangered Species Act. We need depredation permits. For endangered species, we need to do Section 7 consultations. And for NEPA, because we're a federal agency, we have to explain how everything that we do, how it affects the environment. And then there's another handful of similar state permits. And Hawaii in particular, we call it the endangered species capital of the world. So we have multiple endangered species on every single one of our airports. So there's at least 7 endangered species that we have to plan for and know about and make sure we're not impacting when we're also trying to protect human health and safety. And the interesting thing about that is because I'm coordinating the program at a state level, all those things are the things I'm really working on rather than being the one out on the airport hazing birds. But those were the kinds of things that I was being asked about in interviews. So several times in my interviews, I was asked, have you ever done a Section 7 consultation? Tell me about how you would manage a wildlife program. Tell me about how to keep good relationships with contractors. And I didn't have any of those before this position. So will I do this forever? Probably not. But because now I have the permanent status with the federal government at this grade, I am also gaining all this experience I was missing. So to me, I'm hoping this is kind of a stepping stone into hopefully some bear work or other wildlife damage management work back on the mainland. And I'm having way more fun than I thought. So I was always kind of, you know, under the technician level. If there was a problem, I had to go to my boss. They would have to make a decision. They would, you know, have to decide the best way for things to be done. Now I get to make the decisions. I get to solve the problems, and I get to find better ways of doing things. So one of the projects I'm working on right now is feral cats. So we have a huge feral cat problem in Hawaii. Huge. I mean, I think they estimated there's 200,000 feral cats on this island alone, and I'm on Oahu. And this is the smallest island in the chain. They are causing havoc on the environment. And not only that, recently, all the Hawaii Humane Societies decided to stop taking feral cats. And instead, they are going to promote a trap, neuter, release program. This is really problematic for not only the entire island and all conservation on the island, but airports themselves, because feral cats are a huge hazard at an airfield. We actually just had a strike yesterday. And because now Hawaii Humane Societies aren't accepting feral cats, our previous policy was to take all the feral cats we trapped at the airports to the Humane Society. But now that we can't do that, we have stopped trapping feral cats, which is causing strikes and which is also endangering endangered species. So here we have what's called a seabird fallout season. And what happens is particular seabirds and endangered seabirds, when they fledge, they see the bright lights of an airport or a city, and they start circling around those lights, and they just can't seem to navigate or orient themselves. So they circle around the lights till they fall to the ground. And once they fall to the ground, they are easy prey for feral cats. As you see, the bottom left photo is a cat with an endangered Hawaiian petrel in its mouth. So we really need to fix the problem. So what I'm trying to do right now is get the state to allow us to euthanize our own cats at the airports. And I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow. So cross fingers, hopefully we can help solve this problem. Okay, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but you can let me know if I need to stop. But now I want to transition into hopefully how I can give some tips to people. And that's what can I do now? What can I do as an undergraduate to hopefully get a position in the future? And I'll start with experience. And I know you've been probably beaten to death with this already. You need experience, you need experience. But it's true. But I would say if you can find things you're really passionate about, it's not going to feel like extra work. You know, hopefully it will be fun. So I would recommend trying to find a project you're really interested in to get that experience. So, you know, things are going on with TWS, but you can also just call your local DNR biologist, ask what they've got going on. Look into nonprofits, look into federal lands, you know, just anything that might have something for you. And then I also encourage getting any certificate you can. I know personally, having all the certificates I have listed up here were really helpful for me getting a job. Chemical immobilization, hunter safety. If you ever want to work with a firearm, you're going to want the minimum of hunter safety under your belt. Trapper's education, chainsaw, wildland firefighting, wilderness first responder. I know one of my supervisors at one point was hiring someone and as a wildlife, you know, biologist, but all they wanted to know was, could they drive a tractor? You know, so sometimes just having one little bit of experience or certification can really give you an edge. And then I encourage undergraduate research, but again, find something you're interested in. Don't just kind of pick, you know, something just to do it. Think about a question that you really want to know, and then seek out an appropriate advisor, you know, someone who's going to be maybe the expert in that question that you want. And then the summer experience. So if you can get an internship or a job between your semesters, it really goes a long way. I know it can be challenging with Tree Haven trying to fit a summer job in there, but there are projects that only last a month or two. And those would typically be maybe some like working for a graduate student. So checking Texas A&M for those shorter projects might work for you. But even I was able to keep that federal job with only a 3-month window in the summer, which was great. Okay, so we'll do some like resume interview, cover letter tips, and then I will open it to questions. So I can't give you a golden rule for resumes because it really depends on who you're applying to. So if you are applying to a seasonal research job with a state or a grad student, you're typically going to want to keep your resume short, 2 pages max, and very tailored to that announcement. You're only going to want to put relevant stuff on there. So, you know, if you were the manager of a Whole Foods, and feel like that's really applicable, I would still, you know, focus on the wildlife stuff, focus on what's going to make you stand out that's related to that position. However, in almost direct opposition to that, if you are applying for a federal job on USA Jobs, my first tip is to use the USA Jobs Resume Builder. So when you apply for a job, you're going to get 2 options. You can upload your resume or you can create your resume. I recommend, highly recommend, creating your resume on USA Jobs because they have sections for everything that the hiring official wants to know. And it makes it easier for them and easier for you. Because unfortunately, the first look at your resume is going to be by a computer. So once you apply for the job, a computer is going to sort you, and then a hiring official is going to look at your resume. So you want to make sure that you do everything possible to get sorted in the qualified pool. And so this is going to be a long resume. You're going to put all of your experience on here. It doesn't matter how long it is. And in addition, you want to use the exact words from the announcement. For example, I did what I always called frog surveys on the Shigwamak and Nicolet, and that was listening for different calls and recording them. But on this federal job announcement, it used the specific word amphibian song metrics. And so you have to change, if you put frog surveys in your resume, you want to change that word, frog surveys, to amphibian song metrics, because that's what's going to be pulled out by the computer. It's looking for the exact words that match the announcement. And then again, if you're applying for an academic position, a graduate position, you're going to have something kind of completely different as well, called a CV or a curriculum vitae. It's long, but not too long, maybe not as long as your federal USA Jobs one would be, maybe, you know, 3 to 6 pages. And it's going to be detailed and focused more on academic achievements, research achievements, anything academic. Okay, and then cover letters. My tip would be to, if they let you write one, write one. And I don't, you know, for cover letters, it doesn't exactly depend on who you're applying to, you know, so they're going to be similar, but you're going to want to tailor it to the announcement. So you start with the details. You start by introducing yourself and saying exactly what position you are applying to. And then you detail exactly how you meet the requirements of that position. You know, you can use even a bullet point and say, you know, I have a bachelor's degree, I have 3 years of experience, you know, because they need to check those boxes that you are even qualified before they can look at your application. And then you take that more personal tone. You talk about maybe what you're passionate about and why you want the position. You know, I know some people don't write cover letters anymore, and even some agencies don't allow you to write a cover letter. But, you know, I believe they're important. I know they've helped me get positions. So my opinion is to write one. And then also, you know, all the experts kind of say to avoid using words like hope, wish, and feel. You know, you wouldn't say at the end, you know, I hope you will consider me. You instead say, I request an interview. You know, you be direct. On to interviews. So I'm a big fan of the STAR method, and this can actually, this can give you structure in your answers. And often when we interview, we get pretty nervous. And so sometimes we have a hard time organizing our answers on the fly, especially with questions we might not have been expecting. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So every question they ask, you kind of go through these things in order of how you're answering them. So, not moving on yet. So, you know, if you were asked, name a time you had to solve a problem and what did you do to solve it? You know, you would make sure you took the time to explain the situation and what your goal was, and then what action you took and what the end result was. And it's pretty simple, sounds common sense, but when you're in that stressful position, just remembering that acronym can be kind of helpful. So I also recommend practicing and studying, which to me, I always practiced, but as I had those interviews, I learned that I also needed to study. So if I was applying for a job in West Virginia with a state agency, I had to know the resource issues of that state, because I found with state interviews, they ask you really specific questions that are not normal interview questions. So they might ask me to describe why ruffed grouse are declining in the state, or describe the parasite life cycle of the winter tick. Or, I mean, I was asked some really specific questions. And luckily, if you study, you know, you can have answers for those. So if you're going into a state interview, make sure you know all the big issues in that state with wildlife. I did find that federal interviews are a little different. They do tend to follow the more normal interview questions. You know, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. Tell me about a time you solved your problems. But academic interviews, I haven't actually done a lot of these. So I assume they would be more specific though, like a state interview. You know, you're going to get questions about what you want to study, and you should be really well versed in those. And I had an example, but I think I'm getting short on time here, so I'm going to skip it. But the idea is just practice what you would consider a normal interview question. Okay, so now what? You know, hopefully you can use some of those tips. And then again, everyone's path is different. So I had some, you know, different ways of starting out my education. And, you know, not a lot of other people I graduated with are working for the federal government. I know a lot of people that I graduated with who are in grad school or who work for states, you know, but I think the federal path is a little different. But even though I had a year and a half after I graduated with my master's before I got that permanent job, you know, that's actually not that long of a time. And so I hope I don't leave you with any kind of sense of dread. But I think, you know, we have to know what to expect. We have to go in with eyes wide open so we can plan. So, you know, knowing that when you graduate with your bachelor's, that you might work a few years as a seasonal employee. And then always being focused on how you can make yourself more competitive. So getting those certifications, volunteering, taking trainings, and then use your resources, use the people you meet when you volunteer. You're going to meet, you know, a biologist or a technician. Ask them if there's any jobs, you know. Use the people you know, because you're never going to get what you don't ask for. And another thing is, you know, it's hard because it's awesome. All the experiences I've had, I wouldn't trade for the world, even though it did take me a while to get the permanent job. And so if anyone ever tells you there's a certain way you have to be in order to be a wild biologist, just say no. You know, there are lots of different paths, lots of different ways. Okay, so I will take any questions now. I'm not sure how we open up to questions. Do we use a chat room or?
Folks can either chat or just unmute themselves and ask you. It doesn't matter. But thank you so much, Janelle. That was an awesome presentation. Very, very informative.
Oh, thank you. I hope it's helpful.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Yeah, if you have questions, I know there was a few throughout, so maybe we can go back. There's which island do you
sure.
live on?
Okay. I'm scrolling back through the chat here. Cute little bobcat. I am on Oahu. Let's see. Okay, I'll start with Dr. Riddle. Hi, Dr. Riddle's comment. I had a couple of awesome positions with the Forest Service back in the day. Great. R.I.P. deer. Sad Kermit. The cat ladies, yes. So I think with feral cats, there's a really vocal minority, you know, that support TNR, even though we have a ton of research that shows it doesn't work. And unfortunately, lawmakers are the ones that have to make these decisions.